The only people that can fire him are the people of the state of Nevada.
That's the reason I talked to Bill the 17th Amendment. They just go back over the state legislatures determine their state senators.
And every state has their own set of laws that govern recall elections and those kind of things. Every state does. But it's really time for Washington to learn to live within its means, just like everybody else has to live within theirs.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
How do you, I'm very aware of the budget problem, the 1.3 trillion that we spend more than we take in each year. The New York Times has columnists. Paul Krugman is one of them, an economist, Nobel Prize winner, and Alan Blinder from Princeton also writes. And they're both saying that we're not stimulating enough, we're not spending enough to get this economy off the ground. How do you argue against them that says we should stimulate more?
We spent nearly $1 trillion in the stimulus package that was signed into law in January of 2009. Nearly $1 trillion. We lost more jobs than we created. The government, the federal government, does not create jobs. It's the private sector that creates jobs.
I'm aware of that. I'm trying to come up with arguments for letters to the editor that counteract what they're saying, and I have not heard anybody speak out directly against what they're proposing.
The only income for the federal government comes from taxpayers' pockets. That's where their paychecks originate from. So by taking $1 million off the taxpayers to distribute to taxpayers, what did you just do? You did nothing but pay administrative fees, and you went backwards. You took money off of people just to give some of it back.
And when you give the federal government the authority to do that kind of, what's your name, sir?
Joe Clark.
Joe, when you give the federal government the authority to do that, they choose the winners and the losers rather than the private sector through competition and innovation choosing the winners and the losers. And we wind up spending money on failed programs like Salem and not spending money on viable economic programs like the Keystone XL pipeline.
Or drilling offshore.
Or drilling offshore.
Government-owned lands, which they would get all the royalties to, which would be trillions of dollars right there.
We're going to get into a lot of other questions. I'm going to have Jeff come up in a few minutes, and he's going to talk to you about his business, and he's going to talk to you about some of the implications of his business and some of the issues that they're facing, and that's going to generate probably a lot more discussion along the lines of
We
what
have
you're
talks
talking about.
about this all the time.
Yeah. Here's your new healthcare system that went into effect in 2010. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Edna Gillum. I wrote you a letter 3 months ago. I'm on the phone all the time with Sarah. I get phone calls. In fact, I got 3 today from people who call me up and say, well, we heard through a third party you have no health care. One man actually threatened to have me have a warrant issued for my arrest because I don't have health care. And I told him, I said, bring it on. You come to Mahoning County. I said, any judge who signs my warrant, let me tell you, he won't be in office when I'm done. But the thing is that when my husband died suddenly 8 years ago, I was under covert. It was 267 the first year. The second year went to 697. The third year went to 997, which I couldn't afford. I get my husband's pension from Teamsters. It's $87 a month. I live with 6 people in my house in an 800. My whole house could fit in a very small portion of this room. We make it work. We live within our means. We have no credit card debt. I mean, we really make it work. My kids are cut down to 15 hours a week at their jobs. Kmart says, well, if you get 15, you're lucky. You know, my kids are going to college and told there's no financial aid money. Now, I get a letter from Sharon Brown's office who tells me by 2014, if I don't have health care, they're going to fine me $95. Now, how are you going to fine me? Who's going to hold this money? Who's going to be accountable for this money?
That's a very good question. See, the federal government, never in the history of our nation has the federal government ever stepped this far in changing the concept of what we know to be a contract. The Supreme Court is going to be dealing with this issue, and they are dealing with this issue, and we'll find out next month where they come down. My personal opinion is that the health care law individual mandate is unconstitutional for this reason. Ever since our country was founded, the idea of a contract has been that it's between two willing parties, two individuals, two entities, an individual and a company, or two companies, two individuals, whatever that is. Both parties go into that contract fully knowing what they're getting into, and they sign up to it willingly. Nobody makes them sign on the dotted line. That's the definition of a contract, whether it's a mortgage contract or an employment contract or whatever it is. This is the first time that the federal government has ever told the American people, you will either sign up to this contract or we're going to fine you
That's like
and penalize you.
$695.
Well, I think the Supreme Court is, I'm hopeful.
Well, then you better come arrest me and a whole bunch of my other friends, because, I mean, give us 3 meals and a
Well,
cocktail.
you'll be among many that will be overcrowding our jail system,
Oh,
I'm
so
sure.
we're gonna let out the rapists, the drug addicts, the pedophiles, the murderers,
Yeah.
but they're gonna put people like me, who, I mean, my family volunteers time every month. My children, it's mandated by them 10 hours a month to volunteer time to benefit other people. They know what it's like to live without utilities. You know, wondering how we're gonna make it one meal to the next. And I'm real good at managing my budget. You can talk to Sarah, she'll tell you. I mean, I would love to come to Washington and start at the bottom of your budget, because I'll tell you, the $823,000 they spent on the party in Vegas, you'll be getting a bill.
Well, you might take a different perspective if you saw the budget that I supported. The budget that the Senate has not supported, and the budget and the reason that the spending keeps going up is not because the House of Representatives has not put forward a budget. The House of Representatives have put forward the budget that not only balances the budget, but begins to address regulatory reform, tax reform, and some of those mandatory spending programs that if we don't address them, we're going to wind up going bankrupt as a nation. And so we have passed a budget in the House of Representatives.
But see, when we hear in the newspaper and the news how somebody went out and partied for 3 days on $823,000.
And we're holding hearings on that. We're not done.
Okay, and they're not the first group, and it's gone
Oh, yeah.
on for years and years and years. And it's time, if you ask us all to tighten our belts, you know, and turn our heat down and make do, I mean, please get your hand out of my pocket before I do. But the thing is that every time I've written, and I use the Freedom of Information Act and the federal constitution, the state constitution, I want to know, if you're telling me to do it, why aren't you doing it? I mean, if you want to party, use your dime and your dollar, but not mine.
You scare me when you use that term, you, because I haven't been
No,
to
I'm
a
not
party.
talking about it. I'm talking about them as a group.
I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, yeah. But I agree with you. I agree with you. And that is so irresponsible, and that's indicative of those who have lost touch with what the American people.
My personal opinion is take all of you, put you in something like the Astrodome, lock down all the doors, turn up the heat, feed you beans and sauerkraut, and no bathroom privileges.
You know, that might actually work.
That's what my father used to tell me. And the job done.
I thought pass a budget now would be a good start, but you